Hello everybody, and welcome back once more to the Lost Wisdom of the Earth. Now today I'm delighted to be joined by a gentleman who very quietly goes about doing amazing things in the world. He's a third generation practitioner of the psychic and healing arts, and he also works with elemental, nature spirit, plant and animal consciousness, in particular helping farmers in Great Britain, America and Australia resolve problems with crops and livestock, increasing yields and fertility dramatically. He is Patrick MacManaway. Patrick, it's a delight to be chatting with you again.
Sarah, thank you for having me for another presentation.
Now today you're going to talk to us about land whispering, which just sounds fascinating.
Yes, I think it's an ancient and universal tradition, Sarah, and we've lost the habit of it a little bit in our contemporary culture, and I think the invitation is to re-engage.
Yes, well, I hope we've actually got some farmers listening in today, because it sounds to me like the sort of work you're doing is the sort of work that should be done on every farm.
I think traditionally it has been, and as we'll make points and discuss through the presentation, at some point recently, husbandry turned into agricultural science. But I think remembering the relational human dynamic, not just as an abstract concept, but seeing, just as we did with the water presentation, how well-aimed love can make a difference in any growing system.
Yeah,
I think it's very exciting to see what's possible, and then hopefully inspiring people to go and try it back at home, whether that's in the greenhouse, in the garden, or broadacre on the farm.
wonderful. Well, I know you've got some slides to show us, so I'll hand over to you. And yes, can't wait to hear what you've got to tell us.
All right. So we just need to be patient with the technology here as I move into a share screen mode, and then get my slides.
Okay, so we can see.
There, does that look, Sarah?
There you
like
go. Yeah, that looks superb.
Oh, super.
And I can see you as well.
Being retained as well. Technology moment, nice.
I call that a success.
So then, just to say, we want to include in our minds today the possibility that the landscape is intelligent, that the growing systems within landscape are intelligent, adaptive, and interactive, and that possibility exists for us not only to communicate with the elements of that growing system, both seen and unseen, but also through that interaction to support their processes and to be guided to optimize our own in that space between us. And I think, as we said in the introduction, this is really not a retrospect, but an inclusion of knowledge, wisdom, perhaps passed in folk traditions and overlooked in terms of their significance until they've passed into historical rather than contemporary practice. But we have thousands of years of lore in every culture that's been agricultural, as well as the more nomadic communities, of the intelligence of what we would call in Europe the spirit of place, or genius loci, and the different intelligences within that sort of global consciousness that we experience as the spiritual atmosphere of any place we're in. And some places we know are incredibly inspiring and very intense and strong in their atmosphere, and others very quiet and more introverts. And we tend to, when we're at leisure, move within our landscape places that suit our mood or our mind, and traditionally the service of purpose would have been nested into landscape in locations where the spirit of place naturally supported the spirit of that purpose, and that position is embodied within the geomancy, both in the east and west. But in looking at what what the intelligences are that are traditionally named and identified in their different functions and purposes, we keep coming upon dragons, elementals, and nature spirits. And there's lots of stories, and we think of them now as being fairy stories and whimsical tales to entertain the minds of children. But in fact, many of our fairy stories are very dark and foreboding and are in fact cautionary tales, so that children who start to roam from the kitchen hearth have some sense of which nature spirits are safe to go into the woods with and which are not. So based on a very real adult awareness of the spirits, some of them mischievous and misleading, that might influence their children in more wild times. So a great sense of the reality of these beings, and within an agricultural relationship of where we can find cooperation in our growing processes. So traditionally farming is considered husbandry, it's considered marriage. There's an interaction and interdependency really at every level then with the landscape. Nomadic peoples occupy a large, wide area that survival needs to be met, but once we switch to agriculture, we're very committed just to that place. So it's an even more intense relationship, I think, with the intelligences surrounding us, even the non-nomadic passionate relationship. So there's really a sense of marriage that's going on here, and what we want is for that marriage to be a functional one, and for all parameters of relationship, just as we understand and influence them, the optimal and ideal. And as with a human marriage, that mostly comes down to communication and dialogue. And so what we need to do to be is in communication and dialogue in whatever way is available to us based on our personality and skills, and how the balance of our mind between our intuition and our intellect sits. But in some fashion, either instinctive and intuitive or learned, we need to bring our minds to resonance and give loving attention to anything within the landscape that we need to communicate. And there's a science behind the rhythm of our brains, the beta, alpha, beta and delta wavelengths, which I think we discussed in our previous presentation on water. But different parts of our environment have different frequencies of vibration, literally different resonances. And so a little bit like having a particular barcode or a particular frequency signature, simply by holding a thing or a thought or an idea in our mind, our internal radio set, as it were, automatically tunes us to the resonance of that thing. So very simple radar is whatever you give loving attention to in your mind or in the landscape, either completely and abstract, you automatically form a loving informational bridge. And if you can hold that sense and then allow images or thoughts to form in your mind and have brilliant internal imaginary dialogue. Imagination is literally the organ of the psyche that exists for this purpose. And the art of using it in a clear way rather than fantasy or abstraction is how we can most easily establish this communication and dialogue. And it seems that visual imagery is very useful in this process. When we dream, either sleeping dream or waking dream, our brain rhythms naturally concentrating the so-called theta level of resonance. And that level is quite close to the elementary plant vibration intelligence frequency. And so we can communicate in any way, but when we use the projection and then open to receive and see what image forms, projecting image, holding space for image to form as dialogue. In that way, we can enter into their level quite simply without having to understand what science around that. It's a very natural thing to do. Gardeners get into this automatically just through the process of being plants and moving its fingers to the world. So within that communication dialogue, we want to consider reviewing any hurts. The landscape may be carrying residual stress and trauma from human activity, either quarrying or mining, at the physical level, or emotional or intentional patterns of residue that are created with extraordinary stress because they're no longer contemporary or because their content is stressful in its nature. So just the same as engaging with people, we want to see what needs to be done first in order for us to have a relationship. So clearing up any hangover or repairing an injury. And then passioning with current use here is a rather unromantic way of saying talk to your elementals and nature spirits and dragons and tell them what it is that you're up to. And although we have clear intention of how we use landscape, often we hold that as a thought form in our intellectual mind, which is up in a beta frequency, which is actually higher than frequency that it seems that the elemental and nature spirits can easily interface with. And so that part of our mind, for an elemental or nature spirit, it looks like being like they're divers underwater looking up at the shadow of light. And it's a fishing boat or a warship that gives the picnic. They can't necessarily perceive our purpose, only our presence.
So forgive me for diving in there, Patrick. But are you saying that we really need to go into a more meditative state of mind if we want to do this communication?
Yes.
Because I sort of say, I'm going to chop you down, tree. I'm really, really sorry about this, but here's why. And I should, rather than doing that, I should be sort of going into meditation and connecting at that level, really.
Just to make sure that the communication's real rather than just a thought in your head.
Yeah.
The thought will still carry, and I think that the higher frequencies are perceived by the collective consciousnesses, so I don't think the communication is entirely lost. But I think for us to speak clearly and be heard, and then for us to hear clearly any response,
right.
We don't need to be exclusively in theta, but we need to be in theta and alpha. So our capacity needs to include that. There's an optimum state which at one point was called state 5 in brainwave research, which was a state where all frequencies were fully present in both hemispheres of the brain. Bilateral hemispheric synchrony.
How do you achieve that?
Right. Well, it seemed that yogis and healers were in and out of that state as a working state all the time.
Right.
It's probably quite a familiar state to us, but it's not a withdrawn meditative state necessarily. It can be fully engaged and fully alert and fully with its syncing state, like a dowsing state as well, where the intellect needs to be fully engaged. So it doesn't need to be a withdrawal from the cognitive beta state, but it needs to be a full inclusion of the lower resonances that we would recognize from our meditation.
Wonderful.
So, talk to your fairies is the pattern of current use part of the dialogue. And then beyond that, as with any system, if we're asking to do a particular thing, to provide a particular harvest or serve a particular purpose, then there may be things that we can nourish it with, or optimizations of some kind that will facilitate the particular production of one of its many potentials that it carries. So just to tell you some stories of fun about these three parts of the process, and to put them in agricultural terms. And so here, this story comes to us from New South Wales, and a lovely farm being run on regenerative agricultural practices, very caringly and lovingly. but described to me as being a Rolls-Royce property with no spark plugs, and a sense of something holding it back and somehow not fulfilling its optimum potential, in spite of, after their extensive research and application, best regenerative practices. So I was invited to look at the landscape, and looking through the sort of cyclical land whispering eyes, what was perceptible was the residues of a massacre of Aboriginal peoples during the troubled times of displacement for those communities. And so all of the package that we would in Europe experience with similar with battlefield sites, all the sites on a small scale that had gone through bankruptcy or despair or rape or suicidal murder, there's many ways that the landscape can get stressed, and there's also ways in which that resonance or atmosphere can linger actually for very long periods of time, unless it's effectively addressed and healed and resolved, which can look like helping spirits that are still stuck in the trauma of it to be released in return for heaven realm, addressing any curses that may have been placed on the landscape at the time of intense struggle, and then clearing up a bit like sweeping up the floor after a party, the residual patterns that get established of thought and feeling that then run a groove that tends to be followed unless it's refreshed and renewed. So a lot of healing then was defined in sort of healing of hurts was primary business here. And then secondarily, to bring in sort of concept of agriculture as being different from the nomadic use of the land previously displayed by the indigenous cultures.
Is that important, where there's this change of land use, to actually
yes.
have that dialogue with the land about it?
I think it's absolutely critical, Sarah, and I didn't realise about it until I started working in effectively virginal landscapes that had only been farmed for maybe 100 years, but which hadn't ever had this process done. Because in Europe, this has been done for so long that we know what a field feels like, and a field knows what it is, because it's been told that many times. But a piece of wilderness that has a fence put around it doesn't necessarily have that pattern embedded in its own intelligence to understand the intensity of use and the definition of that type of boundary as a barrier to wildlife and the definition of management. And so at a very conceptual sort of archetypal level, it seems important to make sure that a piece of land understands between us to be a home space or a farm space or a commercial space or an airport or...
I mean, that's you know, I mean, we like to know what we're meant to be, don't we? So it's fairly reasonable, isn't it?
It is, and what I've learned and what we know deeply and what some of these stories will show is once the land's really clear about what its purpose is, its natural inclination is to support that purpose.
Yeah.
And it's rather humbling, in fact, that it can and that it does. But I hope I'll convince you by the end of the presentation that it can and that it does. And then we're really stuck because we find that we are actually in a marriage, and she can hear what we're thinking.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that, you know, I'm hearing again and again from various speakers, is that the land and the nature spirits, nature herself, want to work with us. And this relationship is so key to that, but we have to instigate it. They can't come crashing in, you know, we have to invite them in.
They're waiting at the door, but as you say, we have to open that door. That's our role and responsibility. But yet they seem very, very, very keen for us to be back in the conversation, and so there's no reticence generally on their part. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So yes, so in this case, healing first, and then as you pick me up on really making sure that there's clarity of purpose both in a sort of generic archetypal, what is it that we're doing and what does that mean, and then literally what are we doing here in terms of, in this case, what crop is being planted this season, and asking for the energies to be perfectly attuned, not just to an agricultural landscape, but actually this season for the perfect outcome of this crop in every way. And so we did that, and they planted a sorghum crop, which is an arid tolerable grain, 2 weeks after my work. And quite astonishing, and I'm quoting these statistics because they're some of the best I've ever seen, but it's indicative of what can be possible in energetic terms. They came in, they had their best ever yield, 1 ton above average and 0.6 tons above their previous ever best. And within that, they had such high populations of spiders and wasps, natural beneficial predators, that they were the only local farm that didn't have to spray pesticide for a year, which is the natural local predator of that grain. So this doesn't mean we can get increased yields like this every year. I think what this is showing us is how much of the life force, of the growing energy, was locked up and unavailable, to what degree between the massacre, stress and residues, and to what degree between the lack of clear identity and purpose. One can only speculate, but
and it's, I mean, again, thinking about it, it's the same with human beings. When we have a lot of our life force locked up in hurt and pain and trauma and things like that, it's not available to us in the everyday.
Exactly the same, and I think that's a point that's good to make, Sarah. It's there's really little difference between working with a person and working with the landscape. It's just a set of relationships, and it's a larger being that we are, but it's got all the same moving parts. So anything that's true or that works for us is also true and works with a little bit of adaptation into the landscape. This is a story I'm fond of telling in Gloucestershire, an organic dairy farm there. And they had a sad dragon, the geopathic stress, that had gotten into trouble as it ran through a new housing estate just on the edge of the farm. And that was creating disturbance and mastitis in their dairy cows. And so we did a little bit of earth acupuncture, and within a week had reduced the mastitis by 65% and got them out of a fine situation, which consequent to that in commercial herds. And then we got down to very whispering and talking to their fields and really refreshing the commitment and intention of both cattle and horses that they had lived there. And they got an increased forage yield and more weight gain per cow than they could reasonably explain with the forage they did have. And an increase in both milk fat and protein, which was to their advantage, because their ultimate product is cheese. They use most of them and milk and cheese production. And then what I wanted to share in this context particularly is this line there, eliminating bloating from the alfalfa forage. Now, alfalfa, or lucerne, as it's called in some parts of the world, is a very nutritional crop for cattle, but sometimes it can create digestive problems, and the most dangerous of them is something called bloat, where once an indigestible material is deep enough inside the multiple stomachs, the gas can't be expelled and they can swell and die in that way. So one does have to keep an eye on cattle in this crop. So on this occasion, they had two exactly identical fields of alfalfa side by side. They'd been planted on the same day by the same equipment and the same operator with the same seed. And the cattle had grazed off one field entirely and then moved into the second field adjacent. And within an hour, 7 of his 23 cattle were showing signs of bloat. And so he fortunately had been keeping an eye, pulled them off before any serious harm occurred, but then he had a field of indigestible crop that he very much included in his grazing budget.
Yeah. Mm.
And so he invited me to come and have a look. And I literally had a chat with the field, Sarah. And
I love it.
Nobody's watching, right? So this, as I've been saying, is an imaginal process. So the process first is to get very peaceful and centered in one's own space, and then to invite and include one's own personal guides and supporters, companion angels, spirit guides, just to make sure that you're coherent and strong. And then to connect an intentional bridge using the imagination with the intelligences concerned and with the situation. So that for me would include the spirit of the farm, or the intelligent entity guiding the farm entirely, and then the spirit of just that field, the spirit of the loams and soil biology of that field, the spirit of the alfalfa diva, fairy, and then the spirit of the cattle, and I think I called on St. Bridget, who's patron saint or Celtic goddess.
Yeah, so you've got a council going on.
I got a council, exactly, and so it's like sitting down at a circle and resolving a problem as we would do again. It's just using the human relationship template, and so in one's imagination, just a communication really. And the alfalfa had related to the cattle as being wild predators, and it hadn't fully understood its role and being planted in order that it could be eaten in this way, and that it would be replanted the following year as a recycle. And because the communication happens at the speed of thought, this was all done in about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not a big job. It's really just finding that once the pathway of communication is clear, then the exchange is normally pretty succinct.
Yeah.
So we did that, and then 12 hours after we'd had that conversation, John put the cattle back into the field, and indeed the alfalfa had accommodated and changed their secondary metabolite system, which is how they generally alter their leaf content to combat pests and
it's magic at one level, really, isn't it?
It is. So the plants allowed themselves to be eaten, and they were able to graze the rest of the crop.
Yeah.
Without further problems.
And that's I mean, from a farmer's point of view, that's huge, isn't it? It's a massive investment in both cattle and crop.
Another similar story, just to follow that direct line of communication, because this is definitely something that we can all do, including with the house plants or the tomatoes. The lady who was owning and running this orchard in Stanthorpe came on trainings with me to learn the agricultural land system practices. And she'd already, before she came on my course, been on other programs and learned weather control, which was working very well for her. She was managing to intend a hail-proof bubble over the top of her farm, which was keeping hail off even when neighbours were having hail so heavy it was dropping their hail nets to the ground. So she had a clear, strong connection already into the elemental world. And I was able to give her some coaching, after which she went and entered into a very deep communication with her apple trees. And through dowsing and telepathy and I think muscle testing, when do they want water, how much water do they want, when do they want fertilized, how much of each kind, and really being very much in sort of just in dialogue and in service to all of their needs. And this is going very well. And then she thought she'd raise this issue because she sells to supermarkets, that all of the apples have to be in a very specific
Yes, they're very picky, aren't they?
Very picky, literally. And so because they're picky, she has to be picky, literally, to the degree of harvesting through the entire orchard on 3 separate occasions in order to pick fruit when it's the right size, and obviously making that assessment on landers and the trees. So time-consuming, inconvenient, and labour costs associated. So she chatted to the trees about this, And lo and behold, when she came back on the second level, which coincided with a period shortly after the harvest, she reported that every single apple tree had brought almost its entire crop to harvest exactly at once to supermarket specifications.
Wow.
And
I mean,
that's a full harvest once instead of 3 times.
That is amazing, isn't it? I'm going to go and talk to my apple tree now.
Well, with these 2 examples, the first of which I was there, and the second of which I was speaking to the farmer who was excited to tell me how her homework had gone. Personally witnessed, at least in those ways, it means that the communication really is happening.
Yeah.
It means that the plants have capacity to adapt and accommodate, at least to some degree, to humans, and that they did, and that we can and they may. I think it's best not to take it for granted, Sarah. I think it's a relationship, it's a marriage, and it's open to dysfunction and abuse in the same way that it's open to love and cooperation.
Yes, I think that's a really good point to make. We have to work at marriages. We have to work at this relationship with the land.
But it's easier to be in relationship with something you're in communication with.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's the first thing.
Yes.
Just
keep the channels of communication open.
Channels open. Mm.
Oh, this is so sweet. Look at them. They're beautiful.
So they're very cute. They're very sweet. They're obviously a bit tender and a bit vulnerable at this age.
Yeah.
And quite often what are called weaners, calves that have been weaned from their mothers on a dairy farm. Their purpose in life then is not to stay on that farm, but to be sold on to grow into large animals elsewhere. And so there's quite a bit of trade, therefore, in these young stock that are constantly being created as cows come into milk. And I had an opportunity to work on a farm in Shropshire where they were having quite a high mortality rate of these young calves coming onto property, and wanted me to investigate. And we thought from the story that we were going to find some trouble with a geopathic stress or similar in the calf barn. That was what I was expecting and planning for. But in fact, when we got there, what we experienced was simply a lot of lost children, disoriented and without a sense of family or home. And to a lesser degree, this is very common with all animals that move around, cattle and sheep and so on, and move between pastures and sold through markets as a constant part of the industry. And so what I've learned both here and in other farms is that one can literally strengthen the sense of the spirit of place as their home specifically. It's almost like dialing in a barcode.
Yeah.
Just in the same way as we're saying, please be a farm, we're saying, please be a host environment for this kind of cattle. And may they feel at home here, and may the atmosphere and resonance be perfectly nurturing to them in their health and their peacefulness and their happiness and so forth. And so to really create a very strong sense of both the spirit, to us also with that, the spirit of the family community of cattle that's taken there and married in. So they're sort of conceptual entities, but so's the spirit of a sports team. So
yes,
the sports team has a strong spirit. We cheer, we wave, we go to the matches. The stronger the spirit, the better the outcome. Same with a herd of cattle, same with a family, same with a village community, same with a town. We have a sort of collective consciousness, and it exists as a sort of vibrational entity with or without us. We participate and we help to create it, but it also has its own identity and presence. And so part of the work on a farm then is to make sure that there's a strong spirit presence of not only any animals that are hosted there, especially ones coming and going, so they have the same energetic reference, but also to make sure that the diva of that plant is there. Because sometimes we buy exotic plants, or even our farm crops are genetically engineered on a regular basis or crossbred, so we're often not planting next to the same genetics 3 times in a row, which is as long as it takes you to get local. You have your granny born here. So there's quite a bit of work to do just to make sure that the spirit of the plant or animal is strongly present and is known and embraced by the spirit community of the landscape already, if it's not already there, or if it is therefore already there, to sort of bring it into a higher level of exaltation, as it were.
Yeah.
So doing that on this case reduced their calf mortality by 50%.
Wow.
It down very much into occasionally calves will die for whatever reason of illness or sickness, but brought it very much down into what we would consider normal attrition.
Yeah. I mean, 50% is enough to make any statistician sit up and take notice, isn't it?
Well, and it sits as what we call anecdotal evidence, but also it's the application of the principles in real life on the farm. And so I think it has strength, actually, because of its anecdotal and contextual nature. Just to speak a little bit about other optimizations, or optimizations at all, because what we've talked about so far really has been healing of hurts or communication with the plant or animal or elemental realm. Just to leave us with a few optimizations. This is the contemporary version of what we would have used to put up a standing stone for, or a totem pole, or
wow.
These are popular in the biodynamic community, at least in Australia, and they're called towers of power. And they're variously believed to be anchors of the Schumann resonance, which the beneficial growing resonances that the sun imbues our atmosphere with, and also stable central points to anchor a toroidal field, to create a stable, peaceful growing zone with this as its sort of central axis, create a circular space around it of dedicated, optimized energy to whatever purpose. So they're curious. This one is crushed basalt, which is high in paramagnetism, contained within a plastic pipe, which is then contained within a clay pipe. And you see it's got a little bit of a list to start.
Yes. It's a leaning tower of something or other.
But these, like other technologies, similar radionics and homeopathy, have been shown to have a beneficial growing effect that's to some large degree intentionally. Some of it's happening naturally and some of it's picking up and holding and amplifying our intentions. And so this was put in to enhance just this very small biodynamic permaculture kitchen garden, about 30 feet by 30 feet. But they discovered in retrospect, because of observations, that it was creating a field about 450 feet from it in a circle that was enhancing vegetational growth. And they discovered this because there's a cow pasture just the other side of that fence line behind the tower.
You can just about glimpse it.
And open pasture needed more shade for their cattle. They got trees, all same trees, same generation, 2 trailer loads from a nursery, planted them in 2 locations. By chance, not realizing at the time that one location of planting was inside of this 450-foot growing enhanced zone that they'd made, and the other one was more distant and outside of it. But 8 years after planting, way in the background on the horizon behind the farmer's hat is where that tower is, just on the other side of the next line there. These trees are too far away to have received any influence on it. And you can just notice their general height and demeanor.
Yeah.
And then these trees were exactly, it's just laughable.
No comparison.
It's very dramatic. It took 8 years for that to show up.
Wow.
But they couldn't account for it in any other way. Now, they haven't done exhaustive soil analysis as far as they know. It's a uniformly composed pasture. We couldn't totally hang this one up in court until we did the soil analysis. But knowing the farm and having farmed it for many years, this was the only way that they could explain this extraordinary difference in the growth. And so we consider that an optimization. And then I think we've got time, Sarah, just for me to tell you one more, couple more. This is a colleague of mine, works in the UK, who herself at this time was growing annually 45 acres of racehorse forage. And Faye, like me, works with this stuff lots, and so I'm sure there was much degree pokery and blessing of this, that and the other, but undoubtedly a well chatted up and well optimized farm, including specific attention to the boundaries and to their techniques for increasing soil temperature inside defined boundaries, which in a low changing slow spring and fall gives particular advantage in the UK in the shoulder seasons. And so Faye enhanced and optimized her 45 acres to the degree that her agronomist identified that her grass was actually growing 2 full months before the grass literally on the other side of the stone wall.
That is amazing.
You don't get quite that effect in very steep shoulder seasons. Some parts of the world it just gets cold very quickly, but where it's getting cold slowly or it's coming out of dormancy very slowly, 5 or 6 degrees, which is what one can typically achieve, can give you, in some seasons, quite a lot of extra time. So
anything like that extends the growing season, particularly in countries like the UK, where we've got quite a short one, is really important.
It is, and here in Vermont, where I am, we really only have a 5-month growing season, and so in terms of long-term sustainability, there's a lot of looking at actually greenhouses, warm, and any technology that helps is beneficial. This was a result of an Australian colleague working in the field. One of those towers in a corner where 4 wheat fields met, and they got a 30% increase in the yield. But more significantly apparent to value was the increase in quality. It increased its nutritional density, the highest level that's measured in wheat. And then finally,
it's a handsome beast.
There's a handsome beast. And so in some parts of the world, crocodiles are farmed, as other animals are in other parts of the world. And the most exciting part of crocodile farming is gathering the eggs, which involves going with an egg basket and trowel in a helicopter to a crocodile-infested river.
Wow.
And removing them while somebody looks over your shoulder with a rifle and hopefully getting home.
Yeah, sounds a bit dodgy to me.
It's very exciting, and therefore the eggs are incredibly valuable. Because they're both expensive and difficult and dangerous to collect. And so looking at optimizations on a crocodile farm, after reviewing all things that might be influential or benefit, the conclusion was to put iPod and speakers into the crocodile hatchery, where the eggs are incubated, and to play whatever seemed to be life-affirming and beneficial sounds. And the sounds chosen were developed in a resonant kinesiology healing program utilizing the sounds of bedroom gongs and bells, is what was used in this particular instance. There have been other studies with plants and animals that showed them the benefit with Mozart and animals, and you will have come across or heard of those. But in this case, because of connections and human use of this particular kinesiology program. It was applied to see what would happen. And the survival rate of the eggs increased, as you see from the slide here, from 7% to 87%, which, because of the cost of the operation and the value of the eggs, turned out to be worth $1.7 million per year for the farm after you backed out the cost of the iPod and speaker.
And the cost of that was literally installing effectively a hi-fi system.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. But really, I think, and lots more stories, but I think we're pretty much running to the end of our time here, there, and I'm sure we've shared enough to get people's minds working. But remember, we used to sing. Really, for every chore, we had a chant or a blessing or a song for doing the dishes and for mowing the lawn and for rocking the baby. And I think we forget.
Yes.
We forget the human voice can be a lovely thing and can be a powerful thing as well.
Yeah. I mean, everything you shared there, Patrick, is really quite stunning. It, the power of intention, the ability to communicate, nature just wanting to be in co-creation with us, and the benefits without any harm, without any nasty chemicals, or any harm coming to either human, animal, or the land. It's amazing, and it just beggars belief that there aren't farmers queuing up at your door wanting a slice of this.
Well, there are now very established practices of agronomy. And so we've sort of lost the habit, I think, of doing this kind of work. But I think at a grassroots level, maybe the curious or the, I don't know, Sarah, there's a real mix of both. I would say some of my clients are very committed to soil regeneration or the biodynamics or to a wide range of alternatives, and some of them are completely commercial, conventional, and just are open to including another consultant, whatever benefit that can achieve inside of all the other things that they're doing. So it's not, there's no philosophical buy-in, I think, required. And you don't need to be organic or biodynamic or have long hair or eat granola. Some of my clients are very straight commercial, economy based, and what's possible farm by farm is what's possible farm by farm. But I think this applies universally and immediately to anybody and everywhere who might be curious to.
Yeah, I mean, farms, one of the points that is frequently made is farms are businesses and they need to make money, and, we need food to eat and da-di-da-di-da-di-da. But, I mean, all of the statistics that you're showing, they make the business case.
They make the business case very well. And what I see, particularly with clients that I work with over a number of years, and so you see what happens because each season is different, is the more that what I've been talking about here, what we've been discussing is included, the more resilient the system seems to become. Every year has its own pattern of stresses, whether it's hot or too cold or late or wet or an early and so a really strong, thriving system, one of its main features is that it has deep capacity to respond to whatever stress it accommodate that year. And germination rates sustained during late frosts, and quality of crops retained after wet late harvest, and disease and pest resistance. It seems of great value almost at every level of the work, including often people comment that the management gets a bit easier. The things in the human level and planting and the harvest tend to get lucky and tend to go in flow, and there's much less stress. And then finally, I think for people who have and are in farming as a business, the economic pressures are incredibly intense, and the machinery as well as the chemicals are very intense. And
expensive.
And more the work is being done alone or in very, very small teams because of the mechanization. And it can feel very combative of adversity. And a blueberry grower, client of mine in Connecticut, actually, after he found biodynamics specifically, he got me involved 3 years after that. But by starting as within the biodynamic system, as I've been describing, where the primary concern is to connect with the spirit of the plant in place and to communicate with it effectively, so that you become a cooperative team rather than an adversarial combatant. And that shift is huge. And now I can go back to church because I've found right relationship with my plants again. Sort of felt like he couldn't go to church while he was in his combat with nature and the stresses of the farm. So there's some kind of philosophical shift where if we think we're practicing husbandry rather than agricultural science, it's actually more empowering and ennobling and gratifying.
It moves from dissonance to harmony, doesn't it?
It's a very different experience of what it's working on.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know everybody is going to want me to ask you this, and I want to ask it as well. How do you make one of those towers? How would you put one in your garden or on your allotment? I would start. I would start by doing the healing of any hurts, and then I'd go on with the conversation, and think of that as an optimization that comes last once the chat's going. And right. Okay.
And then, if you want, you can put up a mini standing stone in the spot that you douse, or often those towers are literally just made of a plastic pipe and some paramagnetic material inside.
So that's particular types of rock?
Basalt, classically, or granite. Cheapest, easiest for domestic is to get vermiculite from a garden centre and fill them up with those. Which seems to be very magnetically potent and do a nice job. And then it's important to site them correctly. It's important to make sure the nature spirits know what you're up to. Otherwise, it's just a plastic pipe standing there. And they'll be curious and whimsical, but not really know what you're up to.
Yeah. So again, ideally, either get someone to do it who knows what they're doing, or bone up on it a bit yourself,
or experiment, but just keeping communication as you do it.
Yeah, wonderful. I've got to ask you this last question. Can you just tell me a little about dragons? Dragons have come into my world in the last couple of years, big time, and I'm still, if I'm honest, I'm still not quite believing myself, if you know what I mean. But I mean, you talked about dragons as being part of the landscape. How do they work within the landscape as you see it, and what part do they play?
I think, again, using the Earth as a bigger body than we are, I think they're the meridians of the planet. And so they're the carriers and pathways of chi, conductive pathways, large ones, small ones, yin ones, yang ones, above ground, solar type, below ground, watery type, and others. But I think they are, I think they're the pathways that conduct landscape energy through it, just like the meridians that an acupuncturist would work with on us. And because they're so much larger than ours, but we see sinusoidal wave, it's a waveform is the dragon.
Yeah.
And it has quality and personality because it has vibration, and it has quality and personality of its own, and also as a carrier wave, it carries energy through the landscape with various consequences, good, bad, and indifferent to what's upstream of where you are. And the solar pathways tend to go to Earth over strong underground water, which is where the water patterns are focused, and where that happens, you get vertical conductivity, which is where we place our sacred sites and feel the most intense atmospheric charge.
Yeah.
This is literally a solar magnetism, earth magnetism nodal point there. So it's very much like an system is probably.
Yeah. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Patrick, that is so interesting, and I'm sure you've got loads more stories you could share with us.
Always more stories.
Yeah. And we've yet to have that glass of wine in front of the fire and sort of chin wag it, but hopefully at some stage we'll have the opportunity to do that. I mean, there is so much food for thought in what you've said, and I would urge people to really, really sort of think hard about, just the implications when you start to think out, how this knowledge, this understanding could be used to improve the world we live in. It's enormous, isn't it?
It is, and as with all these things, Sarah, I think particularly when you hear different people talking about the same thing, and you've got a number of presenters with overlapping, will provide different angles on the same material or different from it, so that can be helpful, I think, in terms of getting ourselves oriented. And then also, I would say, with every sort of start local and pay attention.
Yeah.
Start in the garden and see how it goes.
Talk to your plants.
Please talk to the plants.
They're desperate to be seen and heard. Yeah, Patrick, thank you so much once again.
Sarah, absolute pleasure.
Fascinating.
I hope that the rest of the seminar goes absolutely well for you, that you get great joy and benefit from your work. Thank you for doing what you're doing and making this available for us all.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's listening in, and we've got more fascinating stuff to share with you over the next few days, so join us again tomorrow. Thank you very much. Good night.